It was a quiet afternoon in a small-town gym, where the smell of sweat and old leather gloves lingered in the air. The martial arts school had just finished its training session. Young students lingered on the mats, laughing, sparring lightly, and showing off small tricks to one another. In the center of the room stood Ethan, a 21-year-old black belt. He was tall, athletic, and confident, sometimes too confident. Everyone respected his skills, but many also knew about his arrogance. Ethan loved the spotlight, loved the attention, and sometimes loved making jokes at other people's expense. That day, in the corner of the gym, sat a man who didn't quite belong to the usual crowd. His back was slightly bent, his hair silver, his hands rough and scarred from years of hard work. He wore a plain jacket with a faded patch on the sleeve, U.S. Army veteran. His name was James Walker, 68 years old, a retired soldier. He wasn't there to train. He was only waiting for his grandson, who had just finished his beginner's class. James sat quietly, observing the students with calm eyes, not speaking unless spoken to. Ethan noticed him, and with his usual smirk, he saw an opportunity. "Hey, guys," Ethan said loud enough for everyone to hear. "What do you think? Should I ask Grandpa over there for a spar? Maybe he can show me some World War tricks." A few students chuckled, though some looked uncomfortable. Ethan continued, grinning. "Come on, I'll go easy on him. It'll be funny." The students' laughter grew, and Ethan felt bolder. He walked over to James and bowed dramatically, mocking the traditions of respect the dojo stood for. "Sir," Ethan said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "would you do me the honor of a friendly spar? I promise I won't break your hip." Awkward laughter filled the gym. Many of the younger students shifted uncomfortably. They weren't sure how the old man would take it. Most expected him to decline politely. But James didn't smile. He didn't frown either. He simply lifted his head and locked eyes with Ethan. Finally, James spoke, his voice low but steady. "Son, fighting isn't a joke. But if you really want to learn something, I'll accept." The room went dead silent. Ethan blinked in surprise. The old man stood up slowly but firmly and removed his jacket. Underneath, his arms still looked strong. His posture straightened, his presence suddenly heavier. The laughter that filled the room earlier was gone. Even Ethan felt a small chill creep into his chest. The mats were cleared. Everyone circled around, their earlier giggles replaced by tense whispers. "Is he really going to spar with him?" one whispered. "This is going to be embarrassing," another muttered. Ethan stretched his arms, trying to look confident, though doubt had started to creep into his thoughts. He had expected James to brush him off. Instead, the old man was standing there, ready. James rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms marked with scars, stories written into his skin. Ethan pushed down the unease rising inside him and forced a laugh. "All right, old-timer. Just don't blame me if you end up sore tomorrow." James looked at him calmly. "Son, pain is something I know well. Let's see what you know." Mr. Hayashi, the dojo's instructor, stood by the side, torn. He knew Ethan's pride had been getting out of control. And he also knew James, a man who carried himself differently, quietly, but with weight. After a long pause, the instructor finally nodded. "All right. Light sparring. Respect the rules. Bow before you start." Ethan bowed quickly, smirking again. James bowed too, slower, more respectful, his eyes never leaving Ethan's. The spar began. Ethan moved first, bouncing lightly, testing his distance. He jabbed, fast, sharp, expecting to land the first touch. But James didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, letting the fist cut through air. James muttered under his breath. Ethan frowned. He darted forward with a low kick, aiming for the thigh. James shifted smoothly, checking it with ease, as if he had read the move before it even came. The students gasped. Ethan's pride was stung. "Lucky block," he muttered. He went harder. Jab, cross, hook, fast, precise combinations he had drilled for years. But James didn't fight like the students were used to. He didn't back away nervously or throw flashy blocks. He moved with simplicity, with purpose. Each step carried experience, each slip was exact. Ethan's punches grazed air, his kicks were brushed aside. Then Ethan launched a clean kick to the ribs. But James pivoted, caught his leg with perfect timing, and let him stumble off balance. He didn't strike. He didn't take advantage. He just released him and let him recover. The room erupted in shocked laughter, but now, it wasn't at James, it was at Ethan. His pride boiled. His jaw tightened. "You're holding back." James's eyes sharpened. He spoke louder this time. "I'm teaching you. Fighting is not about pride. It's about survival, something you don't understand yet." The words cut through Ethan more than any strike could. His face flushed red. His body moved without thought, fueled by anger. He charged recklessly, and at that moment, everyone realized. This was no longer just a spar. Ethan's fists flew faster, but his movements were sloppy now, fueled by anger instead of control. He swung a heavy roundhouse kick toward James's head. James ducked smoothly, pivoted, and stepped inside his guard. In one clean motion, his hand shot forward, stopping inches from Ethan's throat. The room froze. Ethan's chest rose and fell quickly, sweat dripping down his face. James hadn't touched him. But the message was clear. If this were real, the fight would already be over. James lowered his hand. His voice was calm. Again, Ethan snarled in frustration and rushed forward. James slipped past the punches, caught Ethan's arm, and twisted it behind his back with effortless precision. Ethan's knees buckled as pain shot through his shoulder. He slapped the mat in surrender. James released him immediately. "You're too focused on winning. Out there," he pointed toward the door, as though pointing to a world far beyond the dojo. "There is no winning. There's only surviving." The silence in the room grew heavy. Every student watched James as though they were seeing him for the first time. "I've fought men who didn't care about rules, honor, or belts," James said. "Men who would do anything to end you. That's what war teaches you. Every move I make is not for points. It's for life." Ethan sat on the mat, stunned. His chest heaved, his pride fractured. For the first time, he wasn't looking at James as an old man, but as a man who carried truths he couldn't even imagine. One of the younger students whispered, "He's incredible." Another murmured, "That wasn't luck. That was experience." James's voice softened. "You're strong, son, but strength without humility is weakness. Learn that before life teaches you the hard way." The words struck Ethan deeper than any punch could. He looked down, ashamed. Ethan stayed on the mat longer than he meant to. His pride wanted him to stand quickly, to laugh it off, to save face. But something heavier kept him still. When he finally rose, he faced James. His voice was unsteady. "I thought you were just an old man. I was wrong. I'm sorry." James gave a slight nod. Apologies don't mean much unless they're followed by change. The words weren't cruel but steady, a reminder. Ethan bowed deeply, lower than he ever had before. "Please teach me." Gasps rippled through the room. The black belt, the pride of the dojo, humbling himself in front of the man he had mocked minutes earlier. James's eyes softened, a faint smile breaking through. "I can show you what I know. But promise me, what you learn is never for showing off. It's for protecting, for living, for those who can't protect themselves." Ethan swallowed hard and nodded. "I promise." From that day on, things changed. James didn't take over as an instructor. He didn't wear a GI or bow into classes. But whenever Ethan trained, James was there. Sometimes he gave subtle corrections. Sometimes he shared stories from his past. Stories that sounded like movies but were far too real. The students began to look at James differently. No longer the quiet old man in the corner, but as a living well of wisdom. Ethan changed most of all. His strikes grew sharper but calmer. His attitude softened. He listened. He respected. His classmates noticed. His instructor noticed. And soon, Ethan noticed it himself. He wasn't fighting to prove anymore. He was fighting to learn. One evening, after weeks of training under James's watchful eye, Ethan approached him. "You've changed me," Ethan admitted. "But why didn't you embarrass me that day? You could have humiliated me in front of everyone." James studied him for a long moment before answering. "Because true strength isn't about breaking someone down. It's about building them up. I didn't want to beat you. I wanted you to see yourself." Those words etched themselves into Ethan's heart. Months later, Ethan was no longer the same fighter. He was still skilled, still dangerous in the ring, but his presence had shifted. He became the student who helped beginners tie their belts, the one who bowed lower to his teachers, the one who trained not for applause but for growth. And every student knew why. One evening, as the last class ended and the mats were rolled up, Ethan found James sitting quietly as always. He sat beside him. "Mr. Walker," Ethan said, "you've given me more than lessons. You've given me perspective. I used to think strength meant winning. Now I see it's about protecting, about knowing when not to fight. James nodded. Then you've learned the most important part. I've seen what happens when men mistake power for strength. They lose themselves. Don't make that mistake. Ethan's eyes burned with respect. I won't. You have my word. James stood slowly, joints stiff but spirit unshaken. He placed a firm hand on Ethan's shoulder. Good, because one day you'll be in my shoes, and some young man will look at you, full of pride. When that day comes, don't just fight him. Teach him. Ethan swallowed hard and nodded. That night, when James left the gym, his footsteps echoed in silence. But his presence never left. For Ethan and for everyone who had witnessed that spar, James was no longer just a veteran. He was proof that wisdom outweighs arrogance, and true power is measured not in victories, but in lessons passed down. The final lesson. The story of Ethan and James wasn't about an old man humiliating a young fighter. It was about respect, about learning that no matter how skilled you are, there is always someone who has walked harder. Roads and carries lessons you can't find in any book or belt. Strength without humility is weakness. Respect without action is empty. And wisdom, when passed down, can change lives. So if you're listening to this, remember, never underestimate someone because of their age, their appearance, or their silence. You don't know the battles they've fought, the scars they hide, or the strength they carry. And if you've been blessed with knowledge or strength, use it to build others, not to tear them down. Because in the end, true power isn't in the fight. It's in the lesson. Call to action for the viewers. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs the reminder that respect and humility are greater than pride. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to follow, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the lessons we share today may be the wisdom that saves someone tomorrow.